Joining us now is the reporter who broke this story, Devlin Barrett, who covers national security and law enforcement for The Washington Post. Devlin, thanks for joining us tonight. Can I first ask you about the timing on all of this? Do we have a sense of where in the back and forth between Trump and the DOJ these documents first came to light? Was it the first tranche, the second tranche, or the third time the FBI went to Mar-a-Lago?
So there are still blanks in the specifics of that, but what I can tell you is that some of these most sensitive documents were recovered in the search on August 8th. And one of the ways in which that complicated this investigation was that the investigators who were working this case initially were not authorized to read some of the very documents that they were investigating. And they had to get special clearances because some of this stuff was so restricted that only a cabinet level or near cabinet level official could authorize anyone else in the government to review it.
I'm sort of focused on the timing here because the DOJ and NARA had been asking Trump for the return of all these White House documents. And at points in the course of the last year, Trump had gone through these documents purportedly himself and given back at each stage what he said was everything. Can we assume that Donald Trump knew he was in possession of these documents by the time they were returned to the DOJ?
Well, that's one of the key questions that investigators are working to put together all the pieces of. Obviously, Trump has issued a lot of denials in a lot of different directions, frankly. And so one of the things investigators are trying to put together is what did he know and what did he do as the government demands for this information became more and more urgent.
Did the FBI, do you have a sense of whether the FBI knew these documents were missing? I mean, I think one of the most infamous pieces of information we've gotten in all of this are the empty, classified, and top secret folders. Do we have a sense that this is one of the documents from those empty folders? Did the FBI actually know that some important information was missing, or did they only find out about it once they got it back from Mar-a-Lago?
I'm told that they did not know. It's not, like a library book checkout system when it comes to the president of the United States. And so it was when they first executed the search and when they first went through it, they were seeing these things essentially for the first time. When they send the first subpoena, that lists just a bunch of different categories, pretty much every major category of classified intelligence, because they're trying to cover the entire universe of classified intelligence, including markings for nuclear weapons documents. And so you can see from that they're casting a very wide net because they're really unsure of what's there.
Devlin, to the degree that you can talk about this and know, what was the nature of this classified material? Can you give us any sense of what were the category of information we're talking about here?
So I think what's notable is that a bunch of these documents described intelligence gathering activities aimed at China. And that's important for a couple reasons. One, that's some of the most secretive work the U.S. intelligence community does, and it's some of the most difficult work. If you remember, there have been in recent years instances where the U.S.'s network of informants of people who helped them in China were sort of pulled apart and taken down. And so that area is a very difficult area to gather intelligence in. So the notion that this type of government secret was sitting in a basement or in an office, far away from the lock and key secure government facilities where it's supposed to be, is very alarming to officials.
Yeah, we just pulled up the headline from, well, there was one piece in about 2010 and then there was one more recently. But effectively, I mean, the Chinese, I believe, systematically dismantled CIA spying operations. And when we say systematically dismantled, we're talking about killing or imprisoning. I think the estimate is more than a dozen sources over 2 years. That's all especially relevant given China's importance in the geopolitical landscape. In terms of the Iranian information, we mentioned nuclear capabilities, missile systems. I was speaking with a former national security official who suggested the missile systems are important because if Iran is trying to put a nuclear warhead on a ballistic missile, people need to know about that and people will want to know about it. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, and I think everything you said is right. I do want to be clear. while we have reported the nuclear detail and the missile document that we've talked about, I actually don't know yet whether those are the same thing, whether we're talking about the same thing. I have not been able to figure out yet when we talk about that military defenses document, are we talking about Iran? Are we talking about China? Or are we talking about some other country? We're still working on reporting that out. But obviously, to your point, everything about the Iran missile program is sensitive and fraught and has major implications both for security and diplomacy.
Is there a working theory for why Trump had all of this?
You know, I think that is still a question that investigators are trying very hard to answer. I think one of the things that is sort of amazing about this entire process is there's a universe in which if all of this stuff had been returned when asked, or even if all this stuff had been returned when demanded by subpoena, we really wouldn't be here. We really wouldn't be necessarily at a criminal investigative stage right now. So I think it's hard to look inside someone's heart necessarily and know exactly what they want and what they think. But it's a major question, and it's a very important one for investigators to try to answer.
Well, and presumably they might be able to look into more than Trump's heart. Perhaps there is some kind of communication that exists somewhere that explains what exactly he was doing squirreling away Chinese and Iranian intelligence at his beach club. Do you think the sensitivity of these documents, combined with the obstruction in plain view, increases the likelihood that the DOJ is going to serve an indictment here?
So to that question, I spoke to a very senior former Justice Department lawyer today who said this is the sensitivity, the extreme sensitivity of these documents is exactly the kind of thing that would be considered an aggravating factor to prosecutors considering a charge, meaning it counts against him. It is a mark against him as they consider whether to file charges in this case.
Devlin Barrett, scoops galore, bombshells galore, reporter at the Washington Post covering national security and law enforcement. Thank you for making the time tonight, Devlin. Really appreciate it. Thanks for the great reporting.
Thanks for having me.